there. So, what we're talking about today is our teens and isolation. And this is a huge issue for a lot of families. Teens who have closed themselves off physically, they spend a lot of time in their room, they don't come down for meals. Teens who have closed themselves off emotionally, they're not sharing very much. Teens who've closed them off socially, they're not really connecting with peers. So, I'd love to hear from you a little bit about what's going on with your teen and what kind of support or help you'd like from me today. Hi, Torzy. Hi, Althea. Motivation, online learning. Okay, great. So you'd like some help with online learning in your teen, and Althea would like some help with motivation. So Libby says your teen is struggling with high stress levels. Would you let me know, Libby, what they're stressed about? That would be very helpful to me. So, when we think about what are the tasks of adolescence, so the tasks of adolescence are to figure out who I am and where I belong. And those tasks are something that happens when people are engaging with other people. So one of the things that there's been research on is what's called the peer arena, where teens go, interact with other teens. They try on different identities, different personas, and they develop a sense of who they are over time by, taking this piece and that piece and putting it all in the mix of the soup of themselves. So right now, because teens are isolated, the only way that they're able to connect of most with their peers in most situations right now is online. And this is very troubling and difficult because when you're online, if you go to class and you're online, or if you're hanging out with a group of friends, your face is big, it's seen, and everybody can notice how you're reacting, how you're not reacting, what you're doing. And this can really exacerbate the natural self-consciousness of many teens and make them feel generally not as good about themselves as they might be able to do in person. No, this is not only for teens. You're welcome to come because I think isolation is something we're all struggling with right now, including me. So let me see. So there's a request for something about motivation with online learning. I'm going to take a few notes so I get this right. Excuse me. So, because I found in the past that Facebook takes away what you write before I can get to it sometimes. So this is my solution for today. High stress levels, depression. Jennifer, my teen just turned 13. She spends a lot of time in her room by herself. School is a struggle. So, showering and brushing his teeth. So we have self-care also as a challenge, and anxiety about friends, safety, not wearing masks. So social connection comes with different friends via online games. Yes, I have heard this from other seventh graders that they're concerned about getting together with people, actually teens of all ages, because they have a grandmother or they don't want to get sick, or their parent might be primary care worker in some way. Karen says, my son finds it very hard to focus on his online work. He sometimes feels dead inside. I think he's dealing with it all. Um, my daughter is like this. She's isolated in her room, says Samira. She loves online learning because she has debilitating social anxiety, but she has no friends and is lonely. Okay, so let's talk about these topics. So we have motivation, online learning, loneliness, and self care. We could talk for 7 hours. These are big topics. So I'm going to start with a little bit about online learning and motivation. So a lot for many kids with ADHD or kids who are neurodiverse learners, school itself isn't super interesting, but being with other people is compelling. They like to go to class, they like to go to the cafeteria. Maybe they're really good at a particular sport or they're at singing. They have activities that matter to them and get them through the day. Right now, most teenagers have been deprived of doing those activities because while school may be open, after school activities may not. Um, this is hard for them because their self expression is now only relegated to showing up in classrooms and how they perform academically. And often school is the worst domain of functioning for kids with ADHD. So what we want to do in terms of online learning are a few things. One, we want to make sure your child or teen, I'm going to say kids and teens interchangeably, has accommodations, and it has the accommodations they need to learn successfully, whatever those may be. And for some kids who are on a 504, this is an accommodation plan in the United States, and now need an individualized education plan, which is a step up with more support during COVID. Parents have to really sort of fight for those. And that's not pleasant for you, but your child needs the support that they need. And for a lot of kids with ADHD, group learning online is not very successful for them. They can't stay focused, they can't stay on task. Asynchronous learning, which is when you do something on your own, is also difficult because there's no time schedules. There's not there's it's open. You have to motivate yourself to get things done in a certain way, in a certain manner. Synchronous learning, when teachers are actually teaching to you in real time, is usually better for kids with ADHD. However, some school districts are using synchronous learning, which means the teacher's in the classroom and the computer's open and the teacher's teaching to those kids who've come to school, and the kids who are at home are really not part of that in that classroom environment. They may raise their hand or want to ask a question, and no, they're not being called on in a timely fashion. So that's also not going to work for alternative learners. So all of these challenges with the technology of learning online or in a hybrid fashion can be a can reduce motivation. I was going to say decelerator, instead of accelerating learning, it slows it down. And so motivation, we know, is composed of several executive functioning skills simultaneously. And that would be initiation, um, planning and prioritizing, time management, goal sustained attention, goal directed persistence, and focus. And all of these executive functional skills are likely still developing and may be weaker in your child with ADHD. So, this is why we want to make sure that kids with ADHD are getting more support than they may have needed previously, including more one on one support. There are a number of high schoolers who are part of the Honor Society or college students who have community service hours to do. And these kids would be useful for younger kids to sit with them and maybe get some help or do some homework if you cannot afford a tutor or an executive functioning coach for school that would help them. So let's see what we have. So Libby says self-pressure for her grades, missing in-person instruction in classroom due to quarantine requirements. I agree. So one of the things that we want to think about now is that if kids are lacking motivation, can we tell when they're sort of appropriately depressed or feeling down because of their situation, and when they're feeling down is more of a clinical issue, and that would be true for anxiety. And so what we want to try to figure out is how can we help kids who are isolated have some contact with friends online and in person. Is there a Google Hangout place that kids are going to? Is if your child is gender questioning, can they join a Facebook group of other teens who are in that same position? What are ways that we could assist kids in connecting appropriately? Could you, if there's a family that has a child of the same age and your family friends, maybe have a family get together on Zoom of some kind? If not, going sledding or for a walk, to help break the barrier. I think a lot of kids who are tentative or uncomfortable with their social skills normally are not practicing exactly what they need to practice now because of being online. And so particularly for middle schoolers, we want to assist them in setting up some have to um, kinds of interactions. I work with a couple of teens of various ages who have who struggle with social anxiety, making friends, and we've set up a couple of have tos during the week. One, call someone who's outside of your household, whether it's your grandmother or your aunt or a cousin. Have two conversations with someone who does not live in your house. Um, that's a great way to get started. A third way is to brainstorm one or two people with whom you have had a connection in the past, whether it's a deep friendship or a mild connection, and how could you reach out to them now? I just discovered an online site. It's called uh, playingcards.io, and you can play card games online. So you have your Zoom on, you go to the site, and together you can play. And they have chess and checkers and other kinds of games. We have to help kids figure out how to do that. And sometimes, if you're in a larger group situation with another family, or you set something up with your family and their cousins, it can break down the barrier and the anxiety of doing something on their own, and they're still practicing their skills. So I see lots of comments, so I'm going to pause here and take some questions. Harlan, I'm hearing a lot of angst about lack of dating, alone romantic time. Right. Kids can't date. And that's really terrible for them because this is the age where you're supposed to have crushes and get to know people and flirt with them. And a lot of adults are struggling with this too because online dating isn't particularly satisfying. How are you going to really suss this person out? How do you present yourself to them? It's challenging. Dacia asks how to get them to remember to verify their assignments because we have so many missing things that they forgot about doing. We have a 504 plan, but the teacher said it's since this child's older, it's up to them to do it. Okay, I just want to say that is absolutely ridiculous. Because we know that executive functioning skills, the prefrontal cortex, the seat in the prefrontal cortex matures more slowly for kids with ADHD, up to 3 years behind neurotypical kids, which means that a 15-year-old, in terms of remembering to turn things in, might be more like a 12-year-old. And it would be very normal and appropriate to remind a 12-year-old to turn something in. So, what I would set up for you, Dacia, is to make a time before after dinner and before bed where you sit down and you go over what they finished and that they press the send button. And in exchange of doing that, you can watch a favorite show together or earn an extra 15 minutes of screen time, but you create that have to so that they can get a want to. They earn something that matters to them. And the thing that you want to say is, it's not because I do not trust you, because teens are very sensitive to being trusted. They want full trust regardless of what they do. They want to be trusted. And what you want to talk about is how trust is like a bank account. You make deposits based on your behavior and you earn interest. So if your child is struggling, you're going to try out this plan, and when things are turned in more regularly, then you can step it back to every other day, something like that. Claire seeing regression, toddler-like behavior. Right. I always like to say that 2, 3, and 4 are like 12, 13, 14. 2 is I did it my way. No, 2 is hello, goodbye. You say yes, I say no. 3 is I did it my way. And 4 is I am Superman. So, or Superwoman. So what we see at 12, 13, 14 is that yes, no, the polarity, the push me, pull you. At 13, I can do this. I don't need any help. And at 14, I am invincible. And so, of course, these themes shift and run through adolescence in different ways, but we will see regression because kids they don't have the coping skills to make it through this kind of sustained trauma. And that's what I want to say to you is your teens are experiencing trauma. This is persistent and it's ongoing. And it's very hard for them because they don't really have particularly well developed future thinking brains to continue to stay in this present, which is so unhappy for them. Rachel, anxiety, worry on a different issue every day. Something will die. She has cancer. I don't have friends. I'm doing the wrong subject each week, really intensely crying, being sick, not wanting to sleep alone. So, Rachel, in this situation with the behaviors you're describing, I would encourage you to take your daughter to the primary care provider and talk about a referral for a therapist and or medication because she's sunk below what we consider to be typical anxiety, right? So typical anxiety isn't crippling. You have it, you meet it in some way and you do something anyway in spite of the anxiety. But what you're telling me is that which happens, untreated anxiety can, become depression over time. And her worry is kind of all like, um, uh, this is very unclinical, but it's all coming together. It's kind of mushed together into one really downward spiral. And so we want to get her some help. And we're going hybrid in April. That's good. And I'm really concerned about that return to real life, camera off in online school. So, one of the things that I have a problem with, and I don't actually understand this, like it's a cognitive dissonance, is why students are allowed to keep their cameras off when they're in online school. Now, I know intellectually that people come from different types of homes, and some kids don't want people to see where they're actually studying. But at some point, I feel like kids have to show up and they have to show up with their camera on because otherwise, how does the teacher know that you're there? And how do you know that you're there? And so that's something that I would talk about. How can we transition from camera off to camera on sometimes so that when you go back to school, the camera is on? The one thing that I think is different is that, of course, when you're in a classroom, everyone's facing forward or they're in a circle. It's not like your whole face is on the screen in your square and everyone can see whether you're, sneezing or if you pick your nose or whatever you do. And when you're online, you can. And so there's this strange kind of feeling like I'm overly exposed in a way that I'm not comfortable with, and I need to protect myself. Heather, controlling his feelings. So, a lot of what we're seeing now is kids being very angry and reactive. So, I want you to think about anger as the gatekeeper. Anger is the first thing out of the gate because the other emotions, disappointment, um, hurt, um, of course, sadness, um, joy, though that's not usually part related to anger, and some despair are all behind the gate of anger. It's easiest to show those, I forgot fear. It's easiest to show those with anger. The other ones require more vulnerability and comfort with yourself, and that's very hard for a lot of teens. Um, the ASD seems to have accelerated over the ADHD. Claire, that would make sense to me because of the social pragmatics of ASD, and that the fact that right now they're not practicing those social pragmatics, or they don't have outlets for engaging with other kids. And since that's already something they're challenged with, that's going to get a little harder for them. Sometimes for some kids, gaming is actually a way for them to practice their social pragmatics with peers. Erica, screen addiction. He uses a screen to escape. It's very difficult to get him to interact in real life, even just talking to us at dinner. Well, at least you're talking to him at dinner. At least you're having a screen-free dinner. And maybe you want to go around. I talked about this last week, and everybody can say a happy or a crappy of your day, or, a high and a low, a rose and a thorn. Or you might want to say, each day I'm going to ask you to tell me two things, one thing about your day, one thing that went well, and one thing that didn't go well. And that after that, I won't ask you any questions. Just to practice talking to people. And that's why I might consider talking, having specific times to talk to relatives who don't live in your home. Mandy, my son is overly social and can't live without friends. Well, that's true for a lot of kids with ADHD. They're very extroverted, they're energetic, they love to be around people. And so, how are they managing right now? I'd love to hear from you, Mandy, about how your son is connecting with friends. Alethea, yes, yes, yes. My athletic kiddo says, "What's the point?" Right. So this kind of discouragement, despair is a pretty big, heavy word, but it's intense discouragement. Like I don't have the things that I used to have that help me define who I am, and I'm losing a sense of myself. And this is hard for teenagers because that sense of themselves is in flux. It's still forming. Some of us as adults are losing a sense of themselves. I know I'm quite extroverted, as you probably can tell. I miss being with people. I feel like that part of myself is just it's I'm not working that part of myself. I'm not expressing that part of myself. And when I actually see someone in person, I'm like, "Whoa, I'm too much. I'm so happy to see them." I'm like, "Wow!" And so it's how do we gauge each other? And so I think being able to have some light at the end of the tunnel. So your athletic kiddo isn't able to be athletic right now. Is there a plan for when they can be athletic? Is there some kind of athletic activity they could do now? Could they go for a run with a friend? Could they ride a bike? If you live where it's cold, can you go skiing? Or sledding? What are some okay activities outside that are physical that work? Um, Lori, being able to have a future perspective. This is, as I said, this is very difficult for these kids. My son is getting ready to graduate high school, but has a hard time figuring out what he realistically wants to do next. He almost has an inability to have a future focused perspective. I don't think he has that future focused perspective for two reasons. One, I think that's part of adolescence and the maturity into adulthood. And two, kids with ADHD have a now, not now brain. Now is where I'm focused, not now over there. I don't even know what that is, and it doesn't look so good because the now looks, if the now is so unpleasant and unbearable, I can't even think about the future anymore. I don't even remember what that feels like. Um, Liz, the screen addiction, but their friends are also all gaming. How can we get them to learn skills like helping with household chores to learn for when they have to do the same for themselves? Okay, so this is a great question. So I talked a little bit about this before, and what I want to say is that um, it's great that your child is connecting with friends who are gaming, but the gaming has to occur after the have tos. So, here's the baseline. You can have 30 minutes of gaming every day. You want 2 hours? Great. You got to complete this, that'll give you another half hour. You got to complete this, that'll give you another half hour, and 3 nights a week we're going to cook dinner together. You'll in those nights you get 45 minutes. So whatever it is for your family, you want to try to set that up. It's important that you also write down what those chores are. So kids don't have to keep asking you, what am I supposed to do? When do I have to do it? Put it up, make a chart, put it on your refrigerator and tell him to check it out. You know, that's good for him in terms of organizing himself and knowing how to keep what he has to do in some kind of structure. Hi, Lynn from New Hampshire. Hi, Joe from England. Karen, that sounds great with the 1-2 friend. My son has a retired teacher that coaches him. Fantastic. My daughter dances twice a week and has a tutor. Awesome. I love that. She tells me she just doesn't like to be around people. She may feel very uncomfortable with how to be around people. So we know that anxiety travels a lot with kids with ADHD, 34% of the time, according to the research. Most of the clinicians I know think it's higher than that because you have to, in order to, whoever is doing the research, you have to meet the full criteria for anxiety, an anxiety diagnosis. And I'm not sure how that's being recorded. I see much more anxiety among kids with ADHD and particularly teens. And I think this is because, and in adults as well, because all of the negative messaging around how you've missed the mark, on how you could do things differently, i.e., better, right, starts to create a certain anxiety. Like, I'm not sure I want to talk to people because I usually say the wrong thing, or I miss what people are saying. They're talking too fast. I can't hear their conversation. I don't process it. Um, so, uh, she may not like to be around people because she may not like who she is around people. She may not feel like she has the skills she needs to be around people. How can you practice that? What would that be like? And there must be one or two people that she likes to be around. Does she have a friend who dances? Um, what could being around be like now that would help her modulate the contact appropriately? Torsey, okay. The website is playing cards with an S dot IO. And I've tried a lot of online, board games and stuff, and this is the one that think is the best. There you go. Thanks, Anne. Um, what takes 3 years later to kick in? Yes. So right here, behind our forehead, is our prefrontal cortex, and the brain develops from the back to the front and the inside out. And this prefrontal cortex is the last part of the brain to connect with the rest of the brain around age 25 in neurotypical adults. And it's around age 28 or even sometimes 29 for adults with ADHD. So we're talking about a longer process of learning those executive functioning skills and having them settle in. Basil. Hi, Basil. I was undiagnosed with dyspraxia, ADHD, and Asperger's traits. I attended an all boys school. I was shy about dating. Thank you for sharing. Okay. There was an executive functioning gap. Okay, great. Thanks for all the article tips, Annie. Those are great. I agree, Alethea. If I'm off camera, I am doing other things too. That's right. Thank you so much for doing these. I wish I could watch them later since I cannot always stay on for the whole time. They're recorded, Connie, so you can always go back. Um, I'm glad they're helpful. Claire, executive functioning. So a 15-year-old can be similar to a neurotypical 12-year-old. Yes, in some ways, because we all have executive functioning strengths and challenges. So we want to try to identify what are some of the strengths that your child possesses and what are some of the challenges, because we want to lean into those strengths to help show and then to use some of those strengths if possible and other interventions to shore up some of those challenges. Carolina, or Carolina. My child has a stutter and loves NASCAR and Hot Wheels cars, and no one else in his class likes what he likes, so he has no friends. He gets sad about this. Hmm. So that's tough. I guess what I'm wondering is there a Facebook group of kids who like NASCAR? And can you help suss out those kids? Um, Is there something that there's a child who's interested in something that your child is mildly interested in? Because if he's mildly interested, we might be able to get him to participate with someone else in something that matters to them, and he can practice that. Stuttering is a challenge. I think there's much more self consciousness and anxiety around speaking. We certainly know President Joe Biden has shared his challenges with being a stutterer, which I think has been amazing for everybody who stutters in terms of not only normalizing it, but being an incredible role model. Um, so, it would be helpful probably for your child, for your son, to connect with other children if he's in a group. Does he have speech therapy? Is there someone who the speech therapist might be able to connect him with? Brenda, screen time is a huge issue in our house. Gaming online is my 17-year-old's connection with friends, but my husband is very restrictive with his minutes. So I guess my question is, how much time would your son like to have, your 17-year-old, and how much time would your husband like to have? And could we meet somewhere in the middle? And you might want to talk to your primary care provider about their recommendations right now, because most pediatricians I know have have sort of loosened the standards. Usually it was no more than X amount of hours a day, and pretty much most of the pediatricians that I talk to or the MDs saying, we've got to let kids have, we've got to figure out a way for kids to have a reasonable amount of time, not just because they're on screen for school, but screen for fun. And so that's the thing I would differentiate. What is appropriate online gaming? Can there be more on the weekends than on the weekdays? Um, Liz, my son always gravitates towards people who cause class disruption. I'm worried about high school and how falling into the wrong crowd and that he gets influenced negatively, i.e., dangerous activities or substance trials. So I hear that you're worried. And I think that your son may gravitate towards those people because he feels something similar about himself, or he sees himself in those people. Um, and I understand that you're worried about him falling into the wrong crowd. Um, at this point, however, because he's not in high school, it sounds like he's in middle school still. I would really focus on him making some appropriate friendships now that he can carry with him into high school. Kids who care about him, kids who've known him for a long time, and people where he can be himself and feel comfortable in that. Poor insight and poor impulse control. Yes, you're welcome. Okay. Um, Harlan. Oh, for education and other interaction-based activities. Kahoot, it's great. Oh, yes, Kahoot is great. Thank you so much, Harlan. It's homegrown quizzes with color, music if you want, and can be accessed from mobile equipment and can have some fun competition. Thank you so much for bringing that up. I really appreciate that. Anyone have any other online resources? That would be great. I'll look into it, says Carolina. Joe, my 12-year-old loves putting Kahoot quizzes together for us to play together as a family. That's wonderful. Nicole, how do we help them get started on assignment when everything's broken down, but they're just frozen and they can't do it? Well, that's a great question. So one thing that I would want to ask you in response is, are they frozen because they're worn out? They've already been in school all day, their brain is tired. Are they frozen because they can't stand doing it anymore? They just don't have it in them. And in that case, I'd want to have a conversation like, what would you need to be able to get started? What if we worked for 10 minutes only? You just did something for 10 minutes. What's something that you would like to do? So I would start whatever assignments there are with subjects that actually matter to your child and that they enjoy first. Let's try to get them a little bit warmed up. And what are those subjects? Because if they're starting with subjects that they dislike and aren't so much fun for them, that's going to be harder to get going. Jody, my son has ADHD and has developed a tic, which he has started to become self-conscious of. The doctor said it's not connected to his Ritalin medication. Do you have any tips for how we can try to manage the tic or be okay with having it? Thank you from Brisbane. So, Jody, here in the United States, a lot of times when kids are on Ritalin and they develop a tic, their prescribers take them off the Ritalin medication immediately. So I don't know what to say in this situation, to be perfectly honest. Um, I don't know how the doctor can say it's not developed, it's not connected to the Ritalin, and I'd certainly want to do a trial to see if he stops the Ritalin, if the tic stops or reduces. That would be good information. It would be a little experiment to do on the weekends. Um, I think it's hard to have a tic. It's like stuttering or any other physical disability. No one wants to look different or be, noticeably different from their peers. And so anything that you can do to investigate what's causing that tic and intervene would probably be helpful. Um, Shakara, is there a way to find online virtual social practice groups for tweens? That's an excellent question. I don't know the answer to that. I mean, I know that a lot of speech and language folks do groups, and you may be able to find some online. Of course, there's a lot of information about SEL these days. Um, and that might be helpful. I wonder if the school is offering anything. Usually schools have some friendships groups or groups like this. That would be worth checking out. Nicole, that's pretty funny. She doesn't see the point of learning about the fur trade from 100 years ago. Okay, I get that. I'm not sure I would see the point about learning the fur trade from 100 years ago, particularly now. Um, is there something that she could learn from 100 years ago that's actually relevant to her life right now and interesting? I remember when my daughter, who's a very creative thinker, outside the box thinker, was taking US history, and they had to write, you know, some piece, some writing, some kind of creative writing about the founding fathers in the United States. So she went to her teacher, who was a great guy, and she said, "Can I write a song?" And he said, "Sure." And so she wrote a song about Benjamin Franklin, and then she went into class and she sang her song about Benjamin Franklin. And the teacher liked it so much, he had her, she went around to all the other U.S. history classes and sang her song. So, maybe that she doesn't want to learn about the fur trade, but maybe she could, somehow shift that into something that she does care about, like maybe sewing something that involves fake leather or, um, or doing some, um, I have no idea what I'm saying. So, doing something that is related to the fur trade, like maybe what she would want to trade now. If she were creating a fur trade today, what would that be like? Something like that that would engage her. Alethea, great. Alethea, thank you. You're welcome, Jody. Karen, so important to do what they enjoy. I always revert to that if we are having a rough day. Absolutely. And I think it's really important when you're doing homework with teens in particular to say, okay, let's look at your classes. Which are the classes you like enough? Which are the classes you cannot stand? And what's in the middle? And then how do you want to map out your studying time? Do you want to do the hard thing first, which is the thing you dislike the most, and get it out of the way? Or do you want to do something easy, feel like you're on a roll, and then move to something that's harder and finish up with the medium thing, or finish up with the easy thing? Figure out hard, medium, easy, easy, hard, medium, whatever it is. Um, Natural care for ticks and Tourette's. Thank you, Wendy. Um, hi, Kirsty. Guanfacine help keeps ticks at bay. Right. So there are a lot of different medications that can be helpful for ADHD that don't induce ticks. I know that in my family, when my nephew had ticks, he was put on guanfacine, actually. Carolina, people are still buying fur, so it's not a train, but it's money for pelts. There are lots of groups advocating for preservation. Might be more interesting in terms of how it has evolved. I like that idea. I also, oh my God, there's this game called Settlers of Catan, and it's a game that's all about trading. And you might want to see about playing that as a way of getting into the true trade mentality. Basil, I think students with ADHD need understanding teachers. I agree. They also need teachers who are informed and educated about neurodiverse brains. Nicole, we're having trouble identifying things she's interested in other than talking to friends online. So actually, Nicole, I think that's really common right now. What I'm seeing is that kids who had a lot of extracurricular interests, those circles have shrunk because they're not able to pursue those interests in the way that they used to, and also because they're more fatigued from stress, anxiety, a little depression, and the being online is sapping a lot of their energy. I don't know about you, but after I'm online for the day, I'm tired. I find that I don't have the same energy that I had 6 months ago because it's draining. Christy, when my kiddo took a high dose of Adderall, she developed a tic, but we stopped it and it went away. Now she's on half the dose and doing amazing. Fantastic. Does someone else's kid pick and make craters in their skin? So, Christy, I just want to say other skin picking is something that I see in kids with ADHD. It can be like a nervous habit, but it can be a form of almost of a tick, a different form of a tick. So you might want to talk to your prescriber about that. Usually that's a sign of some anxiety. I've had kids who have welts all over their bodies from picking. Some of them have gone on, been prescribed SSRIs like Zoloft or Prozac or Celexa, and that has helped reduce their anxiety and address their picking. Sarah, I talked to a few different people at my son's school and found a counselor who would do an online lunch group on Fridays. Fantastic. I love that idea. Let's try to build the resources that we can in the environments where your kids live. Basil, thank you. Um, Carolina, mine got the Winkies on Focal ER. We switched to QR and it's better but not gone. I have to know what the Winkies are. I assume it's winking your eyes. Thank you, Basil. Christy, what about letting the kids lead? What exactly do you mean by that? I'm all for letting the kids lead. I think that's important to follow an interest that your kid is showing you. I also think that right now it's great to focus on some life skills, like how do you cook? And how, what are some ways that are great, little tricks for cleaning this or organizing that? This is a good time to teach those skills. Patrick Katan is amazing. All about Settlers of Catan. Harlan, even at 65 years old, my 85-year-old mother is still amazed. Harlan has fingernails. I've had fingernails for about 12 years now. Way to go. Way to go. So there is that picking um, tendency I see in a lot of kids with ADHD. Nicole, amazing idea. We do have Catan and hubby and would love for her to play. Awesome. Okay, that is great. So we're going to wrap up. I want to say a few things about self-care in the few minutes we have left. This is a great time for you to send any questions or comments. Um, so right now, self-care is challenging for a lot of teens because they're thinking, what's the point? Who cares if I don't take a shower? Who cares if I wear the same clothes to bed that I wore all day? And so we have to help them manage their hygiene. And so it's great to talk to them like, what is the bare minimum? You have to take a shower every other day. You need to put clean clothes on separate from your pajamas. Just because, it's about getting yourself up and motivated for the day. You put clean clothes on, you earn 15 minutes of screen time. You want to link these things because ideally we want them to feel better about themselves. And while it's great to wear your sweats and relax in them, if you wear them every day, day after day, you may start to feel like you are your sweats. And we want there to be also a difference between daytime and nighttime. That when you go to bed for sleep, you put on different pieces of clothing than you were wearing when you wake up, with the exception, and this is for younger children who often have trouble getting up and they getting dressed for school. So in those cases, I have kids go to sleep in their clothes for the next day, and that seems to work and reduce um, arguments in the family. So, skin picking can be a form of stimulation seeking exactly, perhaps provide an alternative fidget. That's a great idea, Patrick. Of course, fidgets are very important, and there's a lot of really cool ones now. Christy, yes, my 11-year-old ADHD, ODD, SPD just learned how to cook pancakes and eggs, and now she is the expert on our air fryer. It gives her individuality and patience far out. That is fantastic. I love hearing that. Hi, Susan. Happy Valentine's Day to you too. Yes, Basil, I wish you had learned that too. Winkies, he looks up at the fluorescent lights and winks with his right eye and then his left eye and gets stuck looking at the lights. Thank you for clarifying. Nicole, you're most welcome. Thanks for doing this. Thank you for acknowledging that the viewers are from places other than the US and things may be done differently. Of course. Thank you all so much for joining me. For those of you who celebrate Valentine's Day, I wish you love on this Valentine's Day. And for those of you who don't, I wish you love this Sunday, February 14th, in whatever form it comes into your life. I will see you next week. Have a good week. Stay safe. And thank you so much.